Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is a very special episode of the show. It is entitled, Should Marco Silva Be Under Pressure Right Now? And the reason why I wanted to do a show about this topic is that earlier in the week, I actually tweeted out this question to my followers on X, and I got a lot of comments on it. And I'm actually going to share many of them coming up shortly because I want to hear and share their views on it because I think everyone is entitled to their opinion. Also, Tony and myself are entitled to our opinion. We'll share our opinions after that. But I really want to dive into this topic because I think it's a valid topic, Tony, to talk about, especially with an international break coming up and everything going on with Marco, and not just Marco, but also the Cons themselves. And because, again, we have some news today. The majority of this will be about Marco Silva, Tony, but I talked to you off air that a lot of this issue that I'm having with Fulham Football Club is not just about Marco, but it's also about the Cons, because I want Fulham to be a team that's fighting for Europe. And I don't see a vision for that, not just with how the club has been built, how it's being run on the pitch, but off the pitch too. So I'm going to talk about the Cons as well. But a lot of this will start with us talking about Marco Silva. So before I share the tweet and then also the comments, I just want to get your opening thoughts on talking about, should Marco Silva be under pressure right now? And is it a valid topic?
Yeah, look, I think that it's not about whether he should be under pressure. The bottom line is, Russ, is that any manager that manages at this level will bring a certain amount of pressure on themselves if they don't get the results. You know, football has changed massively. Everyone knows now that it is a results business. And if you want to stay in the Premier League, you have to get results. And at the moment, Fulham, unfortunately, are in a position where it hasn't been the start of the season that, you know, maybe certain fans expected it to be or wanted it to be. You know, I was certainly expecting us to do a little bit better than we are, maybe not much, but certainly not as bad as it's been. But, you know, you have to take into consideration everything that has happened up until this point. And it goes back again, Russell, to the poor recruitment in the summer.
Yep.
Yeah, really poor recruitment, leaving it to the last minute. Then this almost like a panic buy for Kevin. I still think that was a panic buy to try and appease the fans. And that certainly hasn't worked out at the moment. Then you go to the injuries that we've sustained and that we've had, and the players that we haven't been able to get back to fitness. And so all of those things have culminated in the reason why Fulham are, you know, fourth from bottom and now going into what I would call a huge game tomorrow.
Yes.
Really, really huge game tomorrow. So Marco Silva has effectively brought it on himself. I don't think his backroom staff are particularly strong. I don't think that they're particularly contributing and helping in any way, shape or form. And yeah, as I said, it's, you know, this is the first time in his tenure at Fulham. Hi, Chris, where he's being tested.
Yes.
And we're going to see, you know, whether or not he's got the cojones to get through it. And I think we have to give him the time to prove his worth. But, you know, unfortunately, Russ, if he doesn't get a result tomorrow, then, you know, it doesn't look great because our next run of fixtures after that are really tough games. Tough games.
No, very good. Very good. And listen, I'm getting a bunch of comments, and guys, I'm going to try to get to your comments as we go through the show, really. And I appreciate everyone that's watching live with us, but I'm going to be sharing a lot of comments from my tweet coming up. And I'll just share this from our friend, Black, White, and Fred. Thank you so much for joining us. And Gary, I'll share yours in a little bit. Black, White, and Fred shares, team news seems to indicate we have a lot of starters close to returning. Think if results don't improve with a less depleted squad, then the pressure is truly on Marco. And I totally understand that, and that goes to your point, Tony. But Where I'm going on and it is completely different. I'm looking at more big picture. You guys are and a lot of people are looking at the pressure being on the normal pressure when the results aren't good. I'm looking at bigger picture situations of a manager that is pretty stubborn, doesn't really change the way he plays, doesn't have a plan B. His contract is about to expire at the end of the season. And I'm want a manager that can take us to the next level. That's where I'm coming from. And again, we'll go through all the points, but I'm looking at it a little bit differently than even yourself. I understand all of what's happening right in front of us, meaning they could be in a relegation battle. And that is a factor too. The reason why I'm talking about it is a little bit different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. But it's almost like we're now trying to run before we can walk, Russ. And
Yeah.
how has the club managed to go from last season finishing
Well,
with their best tally of points, right?
That's right.
And they should have kicked on. There was an opportunity for the Khans to make that investment, to back Marco Silva, to get him on a new contract, and to bring in the new players that were going to strengthen us and improve us and move us forward into that next stage, right? Which, certain clubs like Aston Villa, Crystal Palace, Brighton, whatever, Nottingham Forest continue to do and manage to achieve. We haven't done that. And now we are seeing the effects of that, because if you don't hit the ground running in this league, it becomes very, very difficult. And at the moment, we are now stuck in quicksand. That is where we are, Russ. We are in quicksand.
Absolutely.
And we've got to get out of it very quickly.
Totally agree. Like I said, I definitely understand the here and now, where we are right now. That's the reality. But I also want to talk about the bigger picture issues too. It's twofold. And I understand that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I think it's healthy to have different opinions on things. And like I said, when I'm about to share, you're going to see that. And I want to thank everyone. I mean, everyone that's commented on this. And, and I'm going to share many of them. If I don't get to all of them, I do apologize. But I will try to share as many as I possibly can, Tony. I don't want to talk about them, but I want their views to be heard on Cottage Talk. I think it's important for me to share that. It's not just about my views, it's about their views too. A lot of it is about their views. So let's get going by looking back at my tweet. And I think this is a good place to start. And I tweeted this. I just said, simply, Marco Silva's job as head coach of Fulham should be under pressure right now. It's not only about where Fulham are in the table, but also the fact that he has not signed a new contract and is a lame duck manager. It is hurting the club. Do you agree or disagree with me? Now, just so you know, Tony, I actually looked up the term lame duck because someone's going to question it in some of the comments that I had. And it is relevant, the term that I shared. Basically, this is the last year of his deal, and it feels like he will not return next season. That's kind of where I was going with being a lame duck manager, that you're playing out the string. That's what it feels like to me, and I could be wrong, but that's what I mean by lame duck managers. Last year, and you're seeing out your contract. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm going to read some of the comments, and then we'll stop for a bit. Like I said, I got like so many. And thank you, everyone. This is from David Courtney. It says, disagree. The owners like last-minute deals, and Marco needs to get over his huff at no midfield signings in the window. Once injured players and team form returns, all will be well. Marco could still leave if a top 6 opportunity arises, but the Khans want and need him to stay. Tim Dunstone says, Silva is the club's biggest asset, more important than the Khans or any of the players. He's broken that many negative records in just 3 seasons. He deserves time to fix things. He is stubborn, though, but that's also why he gets the best out of most of his players. Matt Smith, he says, totally disagree. Ludicrous comment. This Fulham team squad without Silva would be serious relegation candidates. Nobody should underestimate the total failure of many a transfer window overseen by Tony Khan. So listen, let's stop right there, Tony. And listen to Matt, his comment. I just want to start there. I agree with him. And I don't think Tony Khan should be director of football. I'm going to say that right now. I think they need to change. I think Tony, we've talked about this on the show, Tony Gold, that Tony Khan should have a different role and not director of football. They need to figure this out because I think that is an issue. So to that point, I agree. What do you make of those comments there, Tony?
Yeah, look, I think ultimately their opinions from fans that are, invested in the club. They're not right, we're not saying that they're right or wrong. They're just opinions.
No, they're
but
opinions.
Ultimately, look, everyone is going to have an opinion on it, Russ. In fact, the reality is that, Marco Silva at the moment has got what he's got. He could have walked away in the summer if he wanted to, if he didn't feel that the Khans were going to back him, if he felt that his hands were tied and, he couldn't see any investment in this club moving forward, then you know what? He hadn't signed the contract. Why didn't he walk? So the question is that Marco Silva in his mind clearly thought he had a good enough squad to work with based on what he produced last year and that he could continue to get the best out of this particular group. Some of the signings that, the signings we know that were made over the summer period, there's a lot of question marks about, who was invested in those signings. Was Marco Silva really behind them? Did he really want these players? And, based on, as I said, what we've seen so far, and it's difficult because we haven't seen enough of Kevin, really. We haven't seen enough of Chikwueze. We haven't seen enough of Kusarasar. And you're looking at these players and actually at the moment, and we saw a bit of them on against Wickham the other night, and it's not great, Russ, if we're being honest. It's not great. So look, ultimately we need Marco Silva because we know what he can do. We know that he's a good manager. We know that he can make things happen, but he's under pressure now. And we know very clearly that the toxicity within the fan base really can turn very quickly.
Yep.
And it will turn very quickly if we don't get a result tomorrow. And, remember what happened last time Wolverhampton Wanderers turned up at Craven Cottage.
I remember.
And the expectation was there that Fulham were just going to, turn up, and we got our backsides handed to us. So there's no gimmies tomorrow. Absolutely not. And he's going to have to set a team up that's going to be hungry, fit, and, he's going to take the game to Wolves and really take it to them because they are there for the taking. Make no mistake. I watched Wolves the other night against Chelsea, Russ, and they were utterly dreadful. Dreadful. Yeah. So, look, the comments are respectfully, some points they make are very important. But ultimately, as I said, it's a results business. And regardless of what you and I think, Russ, and what other fans think, if the Khans lose faith in Marco Silva, they will get rid. It's as simple as that. They will get rid.
Right. And like I said, I'm going to get to my thoughts, and I'm glad that you brought up that point about how the Khans feel about it, because there's a part of me that is questioning how they feel about Marco Silva, even though there have been all these positive comments in the press about how they feel about Marco Silva, because I question some of the things that Marco said over the summer. So I'm just going to share some more comments as we go into the show a little bit more. This is from Dave Salisbury. He actually has a couple. Says, disagree, Russ. We finished 10th in the Prem in 22-23 season, and his contract was up in summer 2023. He always stated that he would look at his options when the time came. He did and signed a new 3-year deal with us in the summer of 23. It's how he does things. Now, I agree with that. And his part two was, I agree that he should feel some pressure, but to suggest his position should be in doubt, if you were, is crazy. Possibly the best manager we've had in our entire history. He will get it right soon. Injuries are killing us right now. Okay, so when I'm paraphrasing a little bit, Martin Fife says, I do believe he'll see his contract out and leave us. I'm not sure that makes him a lame duck or that the club will be hurt. Ivor says, disagree. Our transfer plans, a lack of squad depth, is telling which we and Silva can see is glaringly obvious. could have had our squad up and running from day one, but decided to play brinkmanship to may have saved a few quid. Absolutely cannot trust the hierarchy. And Ivor, to your point, I have questions too. I don't think that they are driven to getting Fulham into Europe the way I want them to. So your comments are extremely valid. This is from Matty S. 100%, 1,000% disagree. That's okay. Still an important debate to have. For me, injuries and some poor officiating are the key factors right now. So a lot of these comments, Tony, are talking kind of where you're going on this. I'm going in a different direction of the here and now.
Yeah, Russell, look, I think with some of those comments, I think we have to put things in perspective. Injuries, bad officiating, that's part of the game, unfortunately. They happen to every club, every team gets hurt. Fulham are being hurt, Russ, and based on some of those opinions, yep. Marco Silva is as much as the hierarchy as anybody else. At the end of the day, he is the manager of this football club. He makes footballing decisions, right? He goes to the owners and he says to the owners, right, this is my plan. This is what I need. In order for me to do my job, I need to have the tools, right? I need to have the tools to do my job to the best of my abilities. If that in that conversation, Shahid Khan and Tony Khan turned around to Marco Silva and said, do you know what? We're not giving you any money this season. We're not signing any players. We're not going to improve on what you had. You're going to have to stick with what you've got with and make the best of it and make the most of the situation as best you can. Now, if I'm Marco Silva as a manager and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, well, how do you expect me to build on last season if you're not going to back me? And with my contract running out or whatever, not looking at it maybe being renewed, Marco Silva's got a decision to make, Russ. Yep. And he made the decision to stay. He made the decision to carry on managing this football club, knowing full well that the Khans were not going to back him and not going to give him the tools. So what does that make Marco Silva? And that's the question that needs to be asked. Why did Marco Silva not demand to get what he wanted or walk away and say, do you know what? It's not good enough. I don't need it. I'm off.
I have some thoughts on that. And when I finish up this section, we're going to talk about that because I do have some serious thoughts, but I want to finish up really just sharing some more comments, Tony, because I think that will be a good discussion between me and you about Marco and the Khans and why Marco stayed in our opinions. And we might disagree a little bit. So that'll be interesting when we get there. But again, I'm just going to share a couple more comments. Like I said, I got so many, I can't share them all. This is from Alistair. Like it says, disagree. Being careful for what you wish for can be a lazy statement at times, but in this case, accurate. Stability is underrated, and whilst it may well move on in the summer, a change now would not be one for the better. Okay. And I disagree with you, Alistair. I'll make my argument coming up in just a little bit. See, this is from TCFFC. No one will agree with that at a distance view. He hasn't been offered a new contract as far as I know. He's dealing with worst injury list I can recall in some considerable while, and I certainly understand that. We've already commented on that. Adrian says disagree. Wow. Chris says massively disagree. You can see how much the squad loves playing for him. You can't buy that. It only takes a handful of positive results and the landscape changes. We are in a position that this currently feels like a poor position because Silva has raised the bar. Good point. But again, my point is going in a completely big picture situation, but I see where you're coming from. That's why I'm sharing the comments. Brian Chapman says, disagree. David Perry says, I'm less worried about the contract renewal and as the tactics on the field. This is where I'm going. The reality is Marco has been backed and has 80 million on the bench. I like to see some tactical adjustment. Winning cures all. Kind of where I'm going a little bit on this, David. Thank you for sharing that comment. Richard Ross is absolutely absurd. What is hurting the club is lack of support of Marco from the board. Like I said, we've talked about that, and I can see your view on that. I'm just going to share a couple more comments. This is from TCFFC. You should have continued with the break you were taking from Fulham views. Interesting. And finally, DW75, go back, taking time off, better for everyone. By the way, a lame duck is when someone's term is officially over, doesn't apply. I looked up the definition. You're wrong. I'm right. It actually does matter here. It does. Lame duck has several different meanings. I actually looked up the meaning of it, and my meaning does work here. So, anyways, we can agree to disagree. Lame duck, whatever, but you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to mine. So, Tony, before we move on with the show, final thoughts on the comments that I shared there.
Yeah, like I said, football is a game of opinions, Russ. Everyone's going to have an opinion. As I said, the emotive side, a lot of people are emotional about it, and rightly so. They have the right to do. My perspective, I always think of football as a pure game, and ultimately, at the moment, as a Fulham fan, am I happy watching Marco Silva's style of football and what he's putting out there on the pitch and producing week in and week out at the moment? Absolutely not. It has been absolutely awful to watch. Absolutely awful. Tuesday night against Wickham was dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. Shocking. Saturday against Newcastle, we had moments, but actually, in terms of our tactics, in terms of the way the team played, in terms of our attacking threat, pathetic. And it was the same against Bournemouth. It was the same against Villa, same against Arsenal, although we were defensively, strong and rugged until we gave away a poor goal. And ultimately, Russ, football just hasn't been good enough.
No.
And that is on Marco Silva. End of story. It's not about being careful what you wish for. We all love Marco Silva and we all want him to do well. But at the moment, he's not producing it.
Well, that's where I'm going to make my argument. This is where I'm going to make my argument.
You can only judge him at the moment on where we are. Right. And you know what I'm saying? And in 20 games time, if it hasn't been addressed or something doesn't change, we're going to be back in the Championship. And then all those comments from all those Fulham fans, they're going to be looking stupid because ultimately, at the end of the day, football is a results business and we need to start getting results. And Marco Silva has got, in my opinion, from this moment, he's got 4 games, Russ, to get those results. 4 games. And if he doesn't get them, then things need to be looked at massively.
Okay, very good, Tony. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm just going to share a couple of comments. I'll be sharing more during the show when I go through some of my points that I want to make. This is from Diego. This goes to the Tony Khan issue. Tony Khan is the biggest liability of FFC. Diego, I made my points fairly clear on that. I don't think he should be director of football, and I'm not going to change my mind on that. Again, going along with this, Ralph Leach says TK would be fired for performance if he wasn't owner's son. Ralph, I agree with you on that as well. And this is from Dylan. He says, it was an embarrassment the other night. Let's have it right. And listen, you were there,
Absolutely.
Tony. Would you agree with Dylan on this?
Spot on. I mean, it was turgid. It was absolute turgid. Rubbish. And you know what? You're looking at you're playing a League One side with so-called Premier League quality going, it's a cup game, it happens. But the way that we played, the way that we approached the game, it was flat. There was no tempo. There was no intensity. It was rubbish, Russ. It was absolute rubbish. And we were lucky. We were absolutely lucky in the end to get through. Lucky.
Okay. And I agree with you. I watched it. I thought it was terrible to watch, Tony. And, these situations are survive in advance, and I'm happy that they did, but I'm not going to deny what I watched. What I watched was bad. I thought when Cess came on the second half, I think you'll agree with me that changed a great deal. Thankfully, he did make a change.
The changes just injected a bit of urgency into the team, which is what we needed. We suddenly started to, pass the ball a bit quicker. We had a bit more tempo.
Calvin Bassey playing left back did not work.
No, but it's not going to. And it's he can do a job there. We know he can do a job there, but it's not so much even defensively. It's just going forward, Russ. We look so devoid of any ideas. And, Kevin, as I said, he needs a run of games. He just needs a run of games. But, for all the good things he did, he didn't produce anything. What did he produce? Nothing.
Right.
So it's almost like, I don't know. I just feel at the moment that Marco Silva has to reevaluate the lineup, his tactics, his
Yes.
formation,
Yes.
everything. It
Yes.
needs to be evaluated because at the moment, what he's doing is not working.
That's going to be a lot of the points I'm going to make. I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to really dive into why I actually tweeted this out, because I have several points, not one, not two. I've got several. But before I do that, I'm going to keep sharing some comments. And it's good to see our friend Black, White, and Fred joining us as always. And I agree with this. He says, surely one of the biggest moves would be to replace Ali Mack. Let's face it, he's in charge of the day-to-day running of the club. I agree with him on that. What are your thoughts on that, Tony?
Yeah, but again, Russ, the problem is these things are two separate things. They're two separate things. We're talking about Marco Silva managing the football club and managing the club on the pitch. And then you're talking about what's going on off the pitch and the decisions that are being made by individuals that don't affect what happens on the pitch. So they are two completely separate issues. And you have to get off the pitch right before you can even think about getting things right on the pitch. But it's still Marco Silva's responsibility to get a tune out of what he's put in on the pitch.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tony. All right. So listen, I let all these comments be shown, and I'll say it again. Thank you, everyone that commented. And I actually tweeted that up because I really appreciate it. You are entitled to your opinion, and I want you to voice it to me. Whether you agree or disagree with me, I don't care what you say. I appreciate it. Whether it's negative to me, I don't care. I want you to share it because your opinion matters to me. It does. Your opinion does matter to me, and I wanted to share that. So, but now it's time for me to share mine. And Tony, I want to get yours as we go through this. So I have many reasons why I came to the conclusion that I not only should be under pressure, but I would really consider in this international break looking for a long-term replacement. Okay, I'm serious when I say this. You might there'd be many that are going to be like, "What are you talking about?" I'm going to give you my reasons why I feel this way. So let's start with Marco Silva's contract to expire at the end of the season. Tony, this to me, again, I think is the backdrop. It's like this huge cloud hanging over the club. Now, you said things are separated, right? It's not just you got to put that aside from the contract than what's on the pitch, though, right? But these are human beings. I'm talking about the players are human beings, and Marco is a human being. So his contract being in flux, did it affect potential players to come into Fulham? Ask yourself, did Fulham lose out on players because Marco's contract was about to expire at the end of the season? Are the players worried if Marco's going to be there? Does it affect them on the pitch? I don't know, but I just feel like it's this cloud hanging over the club. Tony, I want to get your thoughts on that, and then we'll keep going forward here.
Look, they're professionals, Russ. They're used to people coming and going all the time. I'm sure he has a very good relationship with the majority of the players, if not all of them.
I think he does. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But look, you know my views on it, and this is a marriage that's coming to the end. At the end of the season, it's over.
That's what I'm saying, Tony.
Yeah, it's a marriage that's done. I think Marco Silva walks at the end of the season, regardless of what happens between now and then. And obviously, I'm hoping there's going to be an improvement in the results. There needs to be an improvement in the results. Yep. Otherwise, that decision may be taken well before then. But, I think he goes at the end of the season. I think he has taken this club and this set of players and everything within it as far as he can. I don't see what's going to change because he doesn't show that on the pitch, Russ. He doesn't show that he's got the ability to have a plan B. He doesn't show the ability to change the way that the team's set up. He doesn't show the ability to get the best out of players. And we've seen that with Smith Rowe. We've seen that so far with Kevin. We've seen that with, a number of players. So ultimately, unless something drastic changes, and we hit an unbelievable run of form and we shoot up the table and suddenly gets us into that, moment of potentially looking at European football, how does he stay?
Yeah. No, listen, and I totally agree with that. This is a marriage. It's going to end in divorce. And
Yeah.
the supporters of the kids. We're the kids. This is what we're dealing with. We're like, our parents are going through this and it's ugly. They're together, but eventually maybe they need to go their separate ways. And that's also one of the angles that I have on this. I feel strongly that it's going to end, and it might end badly. I hope it doesn't. But my view on this, I'm thinking about, I want Fulham to progress. And I want Fulham to not just settle for, like you said, the football that we're seeing. He can only take us a certain distance. He can't take us to Europe. I'm convinced of it. You've said it to me. Right now, he's taken us as far as he can. What if, and I don't know who that guy is, but remember what happened with Aston Villa. Around the same time, they got Emery. Look what happened with Glasner. Glasner came in later for Crystal Palace. Look what happened there. Areola did happen over the summer for Bournemouth, but look at the change. Sometimes you need to find the next manager that takes you to the next level, as I've always used this example of my son as a tennis player. He had a coach that could only take him to this level. He needed someone better. I think Fulham needs someone that can take him to the next level. I don't see Marco Silva, partially because of what we're going to talk about, that he's so stubborn that he's not willing to grow as a manager. In my opinion, he's set in his ways. So if you're telling me he's going to adapt, learn from his mistakes, and grow, then I would want Marco Silva here for as long as possible. But you tell me, he is as stubborn as they come. Do you see him changing?
At the moment, no, but his hand might be forced at some point, as I said, because at the end of the day, if he doesn't get the results that he needs, then he's got to reevaluate and he's got to look at something. And, whilst we're on the subject of change, it's always a gamble, Russ. If you get rid of a manager and you're looking to bring in, always a gamble, because ultimately, when a new manager comes in, what happens is the whole philosophy changes.
Yep.
The whole setup changes. The way that the under-21s are looked at changes, because the first team manager wants them to play a certain way particularly. So the whole philosophy and structure of the club changes. But you've got to make sure, like you said, that if you are making that change, that you're going to bring in the right person that can have that positive influence and effect on whatever happens moving forward. And at the moment, I would say, honestly, Russ, getting rid of Marco Silva would be a massive, massive gamble. Massive gamble, because I don't think at the moment there is a manager out there that isn't already in a job that could come into Fulham Football Club and bring something that I would be excited about. There is one manager.
I know what you're going to say.
Jurgen Klopp would be the one.
Oh, okay.
But he's not going to come to Fulham. So but he's that manager that could come in and make and change the whole interface of the football club.
Right. But Tony, part of my point, and we're going to talk about the reasons why I'm coming to this, is I agree with you. It is a gamble, but right now we're in safe Silva land. This is who we are. We're stable. And I've seen the comments. Don't you want to be stable? What Marco Silva has done has been tremendous. He has made Fulham stable. And that is wonderful, compared to what we were dealing with Scott Parker, Ranieri, all that crap, Absolutely deserves so much credit for that. My point is, can he take us to the next level? And I have my doubts. And a lot of that falls on his philosophy and how he runs his team. He believes in a certain way. He does what he does. He doesn't really revert from that. He plays it safe. Yes, it would be a gamble. But I'm looking at it right now. If you get me the right guy, I think it would be worth the gamble. I don't know who that is. I'm glad that you brought up Klopp. There's no way Klopp would come here. But I would still make a phone call. I would still try. And my point is that the Cons need to be doing this. And if they haven't been doing this, shame on them. They should be doing this. He is doing this. I'm going to talk about this right now. This is the part of the crux of my argument. Marco Silva has been shopping himself since the summer, Tony. So let's talk about this. This is also part of the reason for me. Marco talked to Daniel Levy about the Spurs job. I have a couple sources that have told me this. In fact, I got one that said he met with Daniel Levy multiple times. So if you're meeting with Daniel Levy multiple times, what does that tell you? It tells you he, again, in my opinion, he wanted the job. But guess who got the job? Thomas Frank. But in my opinion, he was gunning for that job. He wanted that job, in my opinion. So on top of it, this goes to what I think went on in the summer. The source also told me he told the Cons. He wanted to do the right thing, and I will give Marco credit for doing the right thing. He told the Cons he was going to meet with Daniel Levy. But that also could leave some bad feelings with the Cons. So now you're the Cons, and you have this manager that's shopping himself. So what do? What do you do this summer? Do you back him? Or are you more careful on how you're going to spend your money because you know that he's shopping himself? That's where I want to stop. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was a strange one, an interesting one. But look, at the time, Tottenham were in desperate need of a new manager. There was a handful of candidates. Marco Silva's stock was quite high based on the fact that what he did at Fulham last year was tremendous. And look, every manager, how football is these days. Every manager is entitled to put themselves out there or be in a conversation with looking, to move on, improve themselves, and get the opportunity at a big club. The reality is Tottenham are a big club.
Sure.
They've got a big fan base, huge stadium, massive potential. But obviously, he had the conversation for whatever reason. Daniel Levy decided that Thomas Frank would be a better fit based on his philosophies and the way that he manages and stuff like that. And so, did that put the Cons' noses out of joint? Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
Possibly it did. And that's maybe why, we're in the situation where the contract is still undecided. And it might be also, maybe not consciously, but coming across in the way that Marco Silva is currently managing the side. For me, his body language looks all wrong.
Right.
He doesn't look happy. He looks a little bit frustrated at the moment, although he's trying to keep it within. And that doesn't bode well, Russ. It just doesn't bode well. And I think that ultimately he's got to clear his head now. Marco Silva needs to clear his head, and he needs to get back to focusing on how to get the best out of this group of players.
No, listen, I totally understand that, Tony. I really do. And that's also, like I said, what is going on right now. Like you said, body language is terrible. Body language with Marco Silva is terrible right now. So that is something that I've noticed and many have noticed as well. I also want to mention one other thing, and this goes on to the whole thing that happened over the summer. Tony, Marco's words to the press this summer about the transfer window were tough. Now, it's not like he hasn't done it before, but if you are the Cons and you are hearing these words and you're hearing this, I'm telling you over here, managers, coaches would have been fired for some of the things he said to the press this summer. They would. But the Cons, they're invested in Marco Silva, so they allow him to say what he wants and basically do what he wants. He, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, and everyone can disagree with me. Part of the reason why I feel strongly about feeling that Fulham need to move on and look at potential replacements for Marco Silva is that I think he's put himself above the club at times. I think it feels like to me that it's Marco Silva's club and not Fulham Football Club. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can understand why you feel that way, Russ. My interpretation of it really is more about the fact that, as I said, as a manager of a football club, you have certain demands and you need certain things in order to, use your attributes as a manager. And ultimately, if Marco Silva wasn't backed or didn't feel that he was backed and didn't get what he wanted and wasn't happy with that, then he should have walked away when he had the opportunity. Right. He chose not to, Russ. He chose to stay.
He did.
He chose to see it out. He chose to leave it to the lastminute.com. And then we saw the influx of players that we got, as the transfer window came to the end. And like I said, a couple of those, well, one was a panic buy, in my opinion, and a couple of loans that at the moment have turned out to be a complete and utter waste of time. So ultimately, we are absolutely no further forward. And so Marco Silva has made his bed. And now we've got to see what he's about as a manager. Football's an easy game, Russ, when you're winning and you're doing well and you're getting, points and you're shooting up the table. He's now under pressure. Now we've got to see. Now we've got to see his mettle. Now we've got to see what he's about as a manager. And has he got, as I said, has he got the cojones to stick it out? Has he got the guts to roll up his sleeves and get the best out of this Fulham team? Because at the moment, I don't think he is. I don't think he is getting the best out of this Fulham team.
Okay. So now let's talk about Marco and his tactics, okay? Because I think this is where I want to go. Because I've now talked about the contract. Let's put that aside. Let's talk about the football. Let's talk about the players. And are they getting better? Because for the most part, during his tenure, the players have gotten better, but there have been a few that have not, right? Over the course of a period of time. This is the one thing that gets me. Before I talk about a plan B, I want to talk about Marco's tactics. They're extremely predictable, Tony. Before the match, the other manager knows exactly what Fulham are going to do. There's no secret here. It's basically, can you stop us? And many times, teams can figure out a way, or they adjust, and they can stop how Fulham want to play. It happens time and time again. He plays it safe. This goes back to me calling it safe Silva. When have you seen him taking a risk? Now, he talks about the players being brave all the time. Is he brave? I would say no, he's not brave. He plays it safe. Look how Fulham play. It in some ways, it's aggressive, right? It looks aggressive. Why does he play with two holding midfielders right now? It's safe, Tony. It's safe. It's safer than taking a risk of doing what you and I have been saying to do. We would like to see Smith Rowe and Josh King play together. That would be a gamble, but I think sometimes when you take risks, you get rewards. He's not willing to take risks. He only wants to play it safe. Marco's tactics are very predictable and safe.
Yeah, again, Russ, very good points. Look, I know a lot of fans will be, saying that, since Robinson's been injured, we haven't had the same, flair and attacking threat from those areas because of what he brings and what he gives us, going forward. But what fans need to remember is that even when Robinson was in the side, flying and playing, the goals we were conceding were absolutely ridiculous. Still weren't able to keep clean sheets, still conceding ridiculous goals. And that has been, Russ, the biggest problem. And it's not talked about enough, in my opinion. It's just not talked about enough, just how poor we are defensively. And the fact that Marco Silva continues to play two holding midfield players, which, by the way, is implemented to give your defense protection, to make you not as vulnerable and open as we should be. And yet we are still conceding goals left, right and centre. Ryan Sessegnon has done nothing wrong at left back. In fact, he's probably been one of our most consistent players in there. So that's not an argument that's even, even there to be had. Yes, Jedi gives us something different from that area going forward. But let me tell you, Russell, defensively, Jedi is absolutely awful at times. Absolutely awful. And so we haven't missed that in any way, shape or form. So as I said to you at the beginning, yes, Marco Silva's tactics are very predictable. Something needs to change. You can't continue to keep £70 million worth of talent sitting on the bench, getting splinters every week and just wasting away. The reason why Emil Smith-Rowe has not, and a lot of it has to do with his attitude, I think, as well. But, you've got to remember, this kid was injured. He came back from a bad injury. He hasn't been the same player since. But Marco Silva hasn't given the opportunity, really. He hasn't had a string of games where he's been able to play and go and express himself and be that player, because Marco Silva's asking him to do things that actually are not his attributes. Right. There's no point asking Emil Smith-Rowe to be defensive off the ball. He's an attacking flair player that you want in the final third, making things happen. You have to find a way to get the best out of him.
Right.
You're not doing that in this shape, in this formation, with these tactics. That's not going to happen. That's why Smith-Rowe is struggling at the moment to get any shape or form. So the point that you made about playing Josh King and Emil Smith-Rowe and Iwobi as a free,
that'd
for
be
me,
great.
Would be unbelievable, because what it does is it changes the dynamic, especially in the offensive third, massively.
And honestly, I think Iwobi, with the two of them, I think they can get enough done defensively to cover them, but also give us so much more going forward. Iwobi, I think, can do it, Tony. And you and I talked about it. The people that will say, well, you can't play the three of them together. I say hogwash to that. You can play the three of them together, and you can mix and match who does what. You can move them around. They can change roles throughout the match. You can get away with it. And I think it would offer you more than what it would potentially hurt you.
Absolutely. And the thing is that it doesn't have to be in the formation that Marco Silva, has had it. You could do it in that. You could play a diamond. You could go, literally 5 across. You could play the false nine. There's many ways in which you can do it. But, ultimately, unfortunately, Traore, for all the things he gives, ultimately, he just doesn't, there's no end product there. We can see that now. We can see that it's just not going to happen for him at Fulham Football Club. It's just not going to happen for him. So, you know what? We know that. But you've got to start thinking about your forward line. Muniz and Raul. Is there a notion to say, actually, let's play the two of them together. Let's go with 2 up front. Let's play Iwobi just off with Smith-Rowe and Josh King coming in slightly wider, and then play the two. There's so many things that he could look at, but he's too afraid to lose a football match. And the bottom line is Fulham are too vulnerable defensively, unfortunately. Yet they will concede goals, Russ. At the moment, the way that he sets them up defensively, they will concede goals because our centre-halves aren't good enough, our full-backs aren't good enough, and ultimately, if we continue to defend like we do from set pieces, we are vulnerable. That is fact.
Listen, I totally agree with you. And that, to me, again, that's why we're laying everything out. That's why I wanted to share this. It's the reasons why I feel this way. I think we're going through. It's not one thing. There are several reasons. And if you're telling me that he is going to change the way that he coaches, the decisions he makes, then I'm going to change my view. But I've not seen one iota that he's willing to change, Tony. So let's go to my next point. Okay? Marco offers no plan B. Now, I know this is kind of going with being predictable, but what has driven me crazy is when I've watched a manager like Maresca last year at Craven Cottage change the match at halftime. And Marco's idea was to bring on Tom Kearney to change it back. That wasn't going to get it done. It needed to be a little bit more radical than bringing on Tom Kearney to change that match back. And the thing is, it's always seems to be like for like. It's never something drastically different to take away what the team is doing. In some ways, his game plans are good and they're playing a chess match. But at some point, it's almost like Marco's playing checkers and the other manager's playing chess, if you understand where I'm going on this. Because they're willing to make other moves. And Marco is just like, no, we're going to stick with what we got. The no plan B thing is a big problem for me.
He does have a plan B, Russ. His plan B, you hit the nail on the head. Like for like. That's his plan B.
That's a piss poor plan B.
And he hopes that the like for like, the person coming on is going to be a game changer for the person coming off because the person coming off hasn't done it. That is his plan B. And yet you're absolutely right. But look, I think from my perspective now, he's in a position where he now has to make it very clear. Kevin has to start tomorrow, right? No ifs, buts, or maybes. Kevin has to start tomorrow. He can't then throw in a load of players that have been out injured for weeks on end and throw them into a game of this magnitude now tomorrow. He needs to stick with the players that have been playing regularly, that are fit and up for it. And then he needs to make those changes as and when they need to come. But Kevin has to start tomorrow. Josh King has to start tomorrow, right? And he just has to make sure that whatever happens from a defensive perspective, he's not going to change the two holding midfield players. That's absolutely, those two. But if he does go with that, then those two have to be absolutely on their mettle tomorrow, 100%.
Oh, you know what? I'm fascinated with what he's going to do, but I have my doubts that he's going to do anything drastic. I think he's going to play it safe, and I think this is a game where you cannot play it safe. You can't. You need to win this. I've already done a preview show that's exclusive on the Patreon page, and I make that argument. But it's just frustrating, Tony. And I want to mention another reason why, in the short term and in the long term, this is really a concern of mine, and it should be a concern of all Fulham supporters. They need to win tomorrow. You want to know one of the reasons why? Marco's teams always fade in the second half of the season. Ask yourself why that is. Why is it consistent from all the way in the championship that they fade every year? Does he run the players in the ground because he plays such a small squad? Is it tactically that it's just too much that he's asking a lot physically out of these players that they break down over a course of time? We saw that with Iwobi last season. They always fade. Why? I'm asking you, why do you think they always fade?
I think it's a culmination of a lot of things, Russ. I think that certain players are just running to the ground. We saw that a lot last season, where he had opportunities to give certain players a rest. He didn't utilize the squad, in my opinion, in the way that he could have done or should have done. But look, he gets paid the big bucks, Russ, to make those decisions. And in his mind, he sees these guys at training every day, every week. He's very clear about their fitness levels, what they're able to deliver, what they can do. But ultimately, look, I think if you look at the start of our season and the fixtures that we've had a really tough start. And, we haven't picked up points in games that I think that we should have done. Yeah. And now we're in a position from, November is a massive month for us now as a football club. Absolutely. And, we have to try and park the negative stuff. We have to start being positive, and you know what? A win tomorrow changes everything really in a lot of ways, because the players will gain a lot of confidence. The fans will, get off the back, and the toxicity will die down a little bit. And then going into the Everton game, which again, won't be easy, it will be an opportunity for Marco Silva to have another week of getting players back and as I say, picking up a really important sort of run of games that we can be positive in. But ultimately, we can't fade now, because the back end of our fixtures are just as tough. And if we don't get on that bandwagon of winning football matches, it's going to be like pulling teeth for us all. It really will be. And it becomes very, very difficult.
Okay. Very good. All right, Tony, I think I've made most of my points on why I feel this way about Marco Silva. So coming up next, Tony and I are going to talk a little bit differently now. We're going to talk a little bit about the cons, and we'll end with our final thoughts. Okay, Tony. So I've talked a lot, and you've talked a lot about Marco Silva, but a lot of comments we've gotten involve the cons, if you haven't noticed. Let's start, before we talk about their involvement in what's going on with Fulham Football Club now. I'm talking about on the pitch and, the lack of recruitment. I want to talk about this. The news today about the match tomorrow. Again, we're recording this on a Friday. What do you make of the pricing here? This is also part of the issue that I have with what's going on with the cons. I think that they are out of tune with how football is priced in England, and their own supporters. What are they doing, Tony? Give me your thoughts about the
I put,
situation. And they have Sander Berge.
well, I was just about to say, Russ,
Go ahead.
I put a tweet out earlier, and when I saw that from Fulham Football, I thought we have hit an absolute new low. Getting players to sell tickets to fans, it's an embarrassment. It's utterly embarrassing, Russ. And the fact is that we're just so detached from reality. I think I saw tickets £100 to go and watch Wolves Fulham and £61 for. I mean, it's an absolute joke. I'm sorry, it's an absolute joke, and it has been. It is. The ticket prices, I've said it from 2 years ago, have been an absolute disgrace. There you go. Gary said it. £100 to sit in the Riverside tomorrow. It's an absolute disgrace. It's a joke, absolute joke. And the fact that we're not sold out is making it even more of an embarrassment. But this is Fulham. This is what our owners are. This is what they want. They want the tourists in. They want people to come down and have a brilliant match day experience. And there are people out there that can afford it. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. There's no other words to say it, really. There you go, Terry. Disgusting. He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
How can my 17-year-old son afford to go and watch that?
So again, like I said, you just laid out, they can get people to buy it. They can get the tourists to buy it. So the issue I have is that I feel that they are so detached from Fulham Football Club because it's not their priority, that I think that's why you get what you get. You have other people telling them, this is what we think we should do, blah, 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 blah. And it's about money. And I get that to a certain extent. But the lifeblood of any team, and especially Fulham Football Club, are the supporters. And for you to do this, to continually do this, I think that I think you are hurting everything that you're trying to build or supposedly build. So they deserve scrutiny as well. And that's why I wanted to end by talking about this issue, but bigger picture too. I said this 2 years ago. People seem to forget this. And actually, I've been told that I got a little, there might be people that might not be happy that I said that 2 years ago. I think the Cons should sell, right? Well, 2 years later, Tony, I'm not saying that they should sell, but I'm saying if they wanted to sell to someone and they found the right buyer, I would be fine with that if that buyer would take Fulham to the next level. I want these owners, the Cons, to take Fulham to the next level. Is that their number one priority, getting us into Europe? Is it just talk? Because I heard Mr. Khan say that, and I met Mr. Khan. I think he was very nice to me. Tony was very nice to me. But I'm going to criticize them when they deserve it. They deserve it here. They absolutely deserve it. I don't think they're driven to get us or do everything that you need to do to get us into Europe.
This is a conversation that's going to roll on year after year after year whilst they continue to be our owners, and whilst we continue to see Shahid Khan's son, Tony Khan, the greatest director of football we've ever seen in the world of the sport, right? Given a position that he's got absolutely no experience in whatsoever. It's just been thrown in to do it. And, I've said it before, our backroom hierarchy are prehistoric dinosaurs, so detached from where football is in the real world at the moment. Yeah. And until all those changes are made, until we bring in, good ex-professionals that have been involved around the club and are up to date and up to speed with what's actually happening in football, how it's transforming, how it's changing, and where football is, nothing's going to change, Russ. The Khans treat Fulham Football Club like a business. It's a business. It's a commodity for them. It's a plaything. That's it. It is a plaything. They don't really care about the supporters, is the honest opinion. They care about this being a prestigious thing that they've got in London that they can use for whatever they use it for. That is it. And if things go well on the pitch, do you know what? It's a bonus. It's a bonus. It's an added incentive. Excellent, great, fantastic. But actually, they couldn't care less is the ultimate truth. And we've seen it because they don't change anything off the pitch in regards to how they treat supporters with pricing and stuff like that. It's become ridiculously expensive. Young children, young kids that want to go to football can't go because parents can't afford it. You know, if I want to take my family to football, it's costing me 200 quid. That's just that's just nonsensical. It's just not happening. So we are where we are. And ultimately, until that changes, until things are changed, unfortunately, we're on the path that we're on, and we just got to suck it up.
Yeah. So I agree with all that. And listen, the reason why I wanted to end by talking about this is that to be a successful football club, I think you need a coach, you need the players, obviously, but you need ownership. You need a chairman that will back your club and put your club in the position to succeed. You need all those things working hand in hand. I think that what we have here is a football manager who is taking Fulham as far as I think he can. I think you have a chairman and board that are content with where Fulham are as mid-table. They might not be this season though, so they're taking some risks there. And then you have the players who are good players, but unless you have all three working in unison together, I think you get mediocrity. And Fulham are mediocre, and that saddens me because I don't want Fulham to be mediocre. I want Fulham to be a team that fights for Europe every season. I'm looking at Brighton. Why can't Fulham be Brighton? Why can't Fulham be Bournemouth for Tony? Bournemouth. Am I asking a lot? Look at what Crystal Palace are doing. You know the difference in Crystal Palace? Really? It's not just the manager, it's the ownership. It's the ownership. They are investing. They're getting rid of a lot of their good players, but they are doing the right things, getting that team in position to compete on a regular basis. So is Brighton. They are doing the right things. Fulham, I think they're content to be mid-table, to be West Ham. I don't want to be West Ham. I want to be fighting for Europe. I want you to go on a European tour. I don't see that happening anytime soon, Tony. That's all I want to end the show. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's been some brilliant comments from people coming in left, right, and centre, and I think people can feel the pain and the frustration of it all, Russ. And you know, I think someone made a comment about Dylan. I think made a comment about going to non-league football, and actually, I know a lot of people now turning to non-league football, going to support their local clubs because Premier League now, not only are they pricing fans out of it, but the game's changed, Russ, and it's not changed for the better. It's not changed for the better. You're spending a lot of money to actually go and watch a load of dross, is the honest truth. And the truth of the matter is Fulham are not great to watch at the moment. Okay. Steve Reynolds is absolutely bang on. Corporate enterprise is absolutely bang on. But Fulham fans have accepted it. We've become a club of acceptance. And the only way, and I'll say this again, the only way it will ever change is if fans boycott going and you see empty stadiums, empty stands, fans don't go to games, season ticket holders don't renew their season tickets, and everyone says, do you know what? 2 fingers up at you. We're not taking this anymore. Then the club would have to do something. They would have to do something. But it's never going to happen, Russ, because people are too scared to make that choice or make that decision because they don't want to lose out. They don't want to miss out. They're going to miss out on something. And the truth of the matter is, Fulham's in your blood. You want to go. People enjoy it. They want to have their Saturday afternoon. But even then, football now is hardly ever played on a Saturday afternoon. No. Too many games now, Friday, Sunday, midweek. You know, the game has changed. And unfortunately, that's what it's become. You know, this is the first time in donkey's years that we're not going to have games on Boxing Day, Russ. There's no football matches on Boxing Day. What is becoming? What is happening to football?
Look at
and we haven't even talked about VAR and all of those things that have also contributed to changing the game, the way that fans, you know, celebrate or don't celebrate and want to celebrate. And ultimately, until the Khans decide that they've had enough of this plaything, that they lose interest or it doesn't interest them anymore. Unfortunately, Russ, we are where we are and it's not going to change.
I don't see it changing either, my friend. But what's interesting here is we just did a show. We went over an hour. And we got a lot of comments. I want to thank everyone. I also want to thank everyone that commented on my tweet that really was the inspiration to do the show. And I wanted to have everyone's voice heard. If I did not share your comment or your tweet to me, I apologize. There was so many of them. I was having a hard time keeping up with everything. But I want to thank everyone because I wanted to do a show that really just talked about the situation more than just talking about in general terms about the team. I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to really talk about the subjects that I'm used to talking about over here that I don't think is talked about enough and really have a thought provoking conversation. I think we did that today, Tony. So I want to thank you.
No, thank you, Russ. And obviously, thank you to everyone that tuned in and for their comments, because we've honestly some unbelievable comments tonight. Really, really great. And it's good. Fulham fans need to be heard. They need to have their voices heard. And look, we'll always agree to disagree on certain things, and not everyone's going to agree with every single comment you make or you say. But you know what? It comes from a good place. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing. Yeah. We all want Fulham Football Club to be flying and doing the best they can. But things aren't right at the moment, Russ, and things do need to change. So for that to happen, Fulham fans have to carry on voicing their opinions in the right way. It's not about being negative and about ripping the team or the players or the manager apart, but it's about expectations. And you know what? When people part with their hard-earned cash and they're not seeing that, then they have a right to voice that opinion, and they have a right to show their contempt and be disappointed and be upset. But at the end of the day, you know what? We've got to get behind the team tomorrow, and we've got to get those 3 points. And that's all that matters now, Russ.
I totally agree, Tony. And I'll end with this because I'm seeing the comments about, well, what if Fulham lose tomorrow? What will happen to Marco? And I will just tell you this. I want Fulham to win in the worst possible way tomorrow. I don't want them to lose. I don't want that situation to happen because of a loss. I want it to happen because I want them to expand their horizons as a football club and take them to the next level. I want them to continue to win. I want them to win as many matches as possible. Whether Marco's the manager or not, that's never going to change. I want Fulham to win. I will never not want them to win, Tony, and I want them to win badly tomorrow. I totally do. And I truly believe Fulham will be mid-table by the end of all of this with Marco Silva, because I think that Marco will end up being the manager throughout the season. We're going to continue to talk about this. But I wanted to bring up this topic. I think it's something that I needed to get off my chest. So thank you, everyone that listened and watched tonight. I really appreciate that. But listen, we do have to wrap up this show. For Tony Gold, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the Talk Sport Fan Network.